He's an alderman there, and he's been very vocal about what needs to be done. Even Democrats siding with the president in some cases about bringing in the feds. Let's bring in Alderman Raymond Lopez of Chicago's 15th Ward. Alderman Lopez, thanks for joining us here on Connecting America. We appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So just over 2 weeks ago, I noticed that you posted on Facebook, and I'm quoting here, "What we don't need, in my opinion, is the National Guard, but what we do need is the FBI, the ATF, and many of the other members of the federal government who can go after these cartels, go after those drug dealers, go after those human traffickers that have been operating within the city of Chicago for the past 20 years." That was a couple of weeks ago. Now you're saying you're okay with bringing in troops. What's changed in that 2-week period?
So what I've learned in talking with members of law enforcement is that they can use the National Guard to help alleviate the pressure and strains that many of our police officers have when it comes to protecting the city's assets, so they can do exactly what you just described, which is to go back into the communities and focus their energy on going after the gangbangers, drug dealers, and those who are causing the mayhem in our communities. Look, we do not want the National Guard here to be a police force, but they are a uniform presence, which can be very helpful, as we've seen in Washington, D.C., to protect train stations, to protect libraries, to protect major parks and things like that in our city, so that those officers that are assigned to those duties now can focus their efforts better in the community. We already have partnerships with many federal agencies like the FBI, DEA, ATF, and we should be working with them in an enhanced measure to go after those individuals engaging in gang activity, drug activity, human trafficking, as well as some of the homicides that are going on with these cross-state gun issues that you just referenced. But at the end of the day, what we need to continue to do is drive the numbers lower. You know, the mayor and the governor said that crime's already decreased. We're doing a great job. We don't need any help. I had a shooting yesterday in my ward where a man walking down the alley had a bullet put into his head. 2 days ago, I had two children walking behind a high school. One of them shot by a potential migrant and was killed. It's hard for me to just say, well, this is how Chicago is, because I refuse to accept that. Chicago can do better. And if President Trump's offer can help us get to that point, then why wouldn't we want that conversation, and let alone action?
Alderman Lopez, what do you make of President Trump characterizing Chicago as, quote, a hellhole? I understand that you agree with him in some respects, but to use that as a characterization of Chicago, how does that make you feel? What do you think of that?
Look, I don't believe that the president fully understands Chicago. I think what he's saying is it's theater in some respects, but we've seen a lot of political theater on both sides. And the problem that I have with all of this inflammatory rhetoric is that while, yes, that may play to your base, left or right, the people caught in the middle, the residents of the city of Chicago, are left with nobody standing up to just bring common sense to this discussion. I'm not running for president. I'm not trying to be president, and I am not the president. But everything that I've seen in between all of these characters undermines our ability to bring public safety to the neighborhoods at a time when we need it most. And I think that everyone needs to take a step back, cool down their tone, and get in a room and figure out what we can do to help Chicago as a whole.
So let me pose this scenario to you. Instead of bringing in troops to sort of guard the bean there, along the Magnificent Mile and being visibly present, what about taking those dollars that are devoted to bringing those troops to Chicago and bring them into the city of Chicago for support for police, bringing in programs that will attract more police officers, because I know that too many police officers are retiring and new recruits are not filling those ranks.
Absolutely.
Bring in federal dollars, in other words, for local programs that can help attack the crime problem instead of spending the money on this federal troop showing for what would be a limited period of time. What do you think of that?
I think in theory that sounds great, and most people would say that would be the more dynamic way to go. However, you need to have a mayor who understands and appreciates law enforcement, appreciates Chicago PD, and is willing to hire those individuals if we were given money to do so. Sadly, Brendan Johnson has shown a refusal to beef up the ranks, whether it's in detectives, sergeants and lieutenants, or rank and file police officers. So that money would literally be given to us and go nowhere while the crime continues to persist. Now, there are others who would say we should focus on those anti-violence initiatives that we see everywhere and talk about, of which Donald Trump withheld over $400 million this year for programs dealing with violence interruption. But there again, you have an issue with how are we interrupting violence and still having so many murders, so many issues, and so many things that are not working in our residents' favor. So I think there are other things that we should talk about. But in the short term, and again, this is a short term reprieve for our police department, them not having to guard the Bean, Buckingham Fountain, or Navy Pier puts them back in the streets. And this is what law enforcement, our officers, have said they would very much appreciate the opportunity to do because they are themselves tired of sitting around watching tourists when they know many parts of our city need their help.
If nothing else, all of this is putting a spotlight on Chicago and crime in Chicago, and that is, as Alderman Lopez says, is needed.
All right, Alderman Lopez, thanks for being here on Connecting America. Appreciate that.